I think the thing that came to mind straight away with the question, can cultural differences be overcome? And even your story was this whole thing of code switching, right? When I'm in a professional space, I will speak a certain way. When I'm with my friends that I've grown up with from back home, I'll, drop drop the accent a bit, maybe bring in more bass, the slang comes in, with the girl them, with the man them, with all of that stuff comes in.
Hello, welcome back to Margaret Taribo's podcast. This is a space where we look at topics that, for this generation, the generations to come, the past, present, and future. We're doing it in a real and vulnerable way that people can learn from, people can be transformed with. And actually, we want the impact to be felt by the wider community, professionals, practitioners as a whole. So welcome back to Dr. Pelumi and Mr. Stephen Adewale. It's been a pleasure having you. We're going to be looking at another aspect of our conversation today. Can cultural differences be overcome? Can cultural differences be overcome? And I'll give you some background. I know that when we come from different cultures, we come into the United Kingdom, the way we're brought up, the way we use language, it's so unique. And then we get confused. And sometimes because we now know that we're in a situation or in a culture that uses language differently, it can actually divide us. It can actually keep us isolated. And then we just want to be insular. We stay with the people we know, the clan we know, the families we know. So we're not actually moving into spaces. And this actually impacts on our children because they grow up in another culture. And then there's that clash, that cultural conflict. So we want to find out today from the stories you have for us today, can this actually be overcome? Let's look at stories and let's look at language. Let's look at the idioms that are being used and see what can we do about it. I'll give you one. When I was going back into school here, I went for an interview. That was when I was doing my apprenticeship. And one of the questions they asked me, they said, "Oh, can you tell us a bit about the big lottery funding?" I had no clue what the big lottery funding was all about. And I just related it back to where I came from, thinking that it had to do with gambling. And that was the way I answered the question.
What?
But you can see the play of language there because I didn't understand the culture, the terms that were used, the lingua that is used. I didn't understand the system at all. And that impacts. So the culture came into play a bit there. So yeah, so that's a bit, I've learned a lot from those years ago, trust me. But yeah.
I think the thing that came to mind straight away with the question, can cultural differences be overcome? And even your story was this whole thing of code switching, right? And moving in different spaces. So sometimes code switching can be seen as a bad thing. Like, why do I have to alter my language or how I speak? And at times it can be tiring. I'm not going to.
Can you give it? So I didn't even know there was a word about code switching. Yeah.
So, for instance, when I'm in a professional space, I will speak a certain way. When I'm with my friends that I've grown up with from back home, I'll, drop the accent a bit, maybe bring in more bass, the slang comes in, with the girl them, with the man them, with all of that stuff comes in. Or even like when I'm around Nigerians, my friends have said that my Nigerian accent comes out more, right?
Yes.
So it's that whole thing of code switching and putting on different code switching and like language and all of that, how you speak in different spaces. And it can be tiring in terms of, in this space, this way, that way. But then I think it lends itself in terms of, I see it now as a bit of my superpower, the fact that I can relate to different cultures and can move between different spaces. For a long time, I didn't see it as a superpower. For a long time, I just was like, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to make all of this effort? And there's also an element of frustration in that, because it's a thing of, at times it feels like we have to make, like Afro-Caribbeans, we have to make more of an effort in terms of even educating about names, educating about this, that, and the other. And a funny incident happened. So I've just finished off doing a poetry development program with South Bank. So I was part of the South Bank New Poets Collective for 2023, 2024. And there was an incident in terms of we went to, I believe, karaoke or something, and different songs come up. And then someone mentioned a song, and I was like, I have never heard of this song. And all of the British, white, English, Caucasian, whatever word you want, were like, what? You've never heard of this song? And I was like, no, I haven't. And I think I dropped the phrase, educate me about your culture. It can't always be me. Educate about my culture, right? And I think it's that thing of we have all come from different cultures, and the level of education is needed to gain insight.
Sorry, there's something you said there. We have to always educate people about where we're coming from. But do we always get, although they might challenge that by saying in school, you learn about British history. But is it the same thing, really, about this education in a fun or informal way?
I think with British history, we learn about in school, a lot of things are repeated. And I think that's why there's a lot of advocacy from different groups in terms of to whether it's decolonize the curriculum or to have more variety in terms of the nuances in British history, because it's only through one lens. And we don't have conversation that is stimulating in terms of British history and and just the different things that have happened in British history. So even for young Black Afro-Caribbean students, we're only taught through a certain lens and only see ourselves through a certain lens. Whereas when there's a diversity of thought and culture, then
fantastic. Stephen,
Yes,
what do you have to say?
Well, the culture mashup, man, for me it was something else. Because when I came back to this country, having been through secondary school and college in Nigeria, I came back to this country just after I turned 20. So I was there for 11 years. So just after I turned 24 was when I came back. So I'd got accustomed to different cultures. I'd had a bit of here, a bit of there. And now to come back to this, and it was like, wow, it was a bit of a rude awakening in a way. There's some things, they'd gone through the 80s here that I wasn't part of.
Yes.
So I didn't experience all the 80s. I experienced all the 80s in Nigeria. So when I think one of the funniest things that I remember when I came back to this country is the fact that I got a job. All right. So a friend of mine arranged a job for me, and I never forget that, because it was actually a cleaning job in Brixton. It was in the Brixton Marks and Spencers. And so I had to go there. The first shock for me was that I had to get up at some silly hour in the morning. Where I'm coming from, ain't nobody getting up at those kind of times. You understand what I'm saying? We don't get up to go to work. Well, I didn't see my parents do that. They got up at a normal time to go to work. So I have to be at work at 5 o'clock. Like, what? 5 o'clock? Okay, all right. And I never forget, because I went there, it was a Friday. And they gave me this buffer machine to use. What on earth? Where we come from? We bend down with brooms and sweep the floor. Now you're giving me a machine that I have no idea how it works. Okay, 10, 15 minutes into the work, I was shown how to use it. I got okay with it, used it. At the end of the night, it was only 2 hours work. At the end of the night, they said, see you tomorrow. And I'm like, well, you got to bear in mind, this is 1989. Okay.
1989.
This is 1989. So they said, see you tomorrow. And I went home, like, see you tomorrow? Are you having a laugh? Where I come from, culture, we don't work on Saturday.
So it was a Friday. Okay.
So, no, I ain't going to no work on Saturday. And I didn't.
Oh.
I felt, I felt, well, why? What do you mean come to work on Saturday? Well, no. So I didn't go on Saturday. Went back on Monday. And they said, what are you doing here? I said, I'll come to work. I said, no, you didn't come on Saturday. I said, yeah. I actually said it. Where I come from, we don't work on Saturday. I said, well, we do. We've replaced you.
Oh, wow.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was a Culture shock. It hit me hard. Listen, you're in a different place right now. Yeah, and this is how we do things here. So okay, back home. And it made me realize that I've got to make adjustments here. This is different. This is a different ball game to where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So that is part of a culture adjustment that had to happen as well. And I remember another one as well. Again, menial work, but I was working as a banquet porter in Marble Arch in those days, and again, culture. That people were then. I was still an Egyptian. Okay, so I was still an Egyptian. So I didn't have Christ as my Lord and Savior then. But so the punters at the event were giving us alcohol, and I was drinking. I was drinking, and then I drank, and I drank, and I drank. And I got to the point where I was happy. You know what I'm saying? Happy. And then at the end of the night, one of the customers gave me a bottle of wine. It was open but wasn't red. And I was about to make my way out, and they stopped me and said I stole it. Culture. They said I stole it because why? Black man. I really did feel it was because I was a black man. There were other people were there that had the same thing, but they stopped me and said, you stole it. I said, I didn't steal it. Someone gave it to me. One of the customers gave it to me. And they delayed me. They kept me there and they called the police. They actually called the police that night. And before the police came, I said I was already drinking. I fell asleep in the waiting room. And the police then came and questioned me. Nothing. No, don't worry about it. Took the bottle. Don't come back here. I don't want to come back here. You're accusing me of doing something I've never done. But that is the culture. And it was a lesson.
Wow.
Yeah.
How do you think that situation could have been different in terms of, how I've mentioned we're always doing the educating and sometimes it feels as if there's no effort from the other side. So looking back with hindsight and with what you know now and what you've learned about the culture, what do you think could have really switched that situation, whether from the other side or from you and what you've learned from?
Well, I think for me personally, I think maybe to have a look at how they do approach things that on the job. Is it professional? Is it right? Is it appropriate to take drinks? Is it right to be drinking in the moment? That's one thing. But I also think in them listening to hear me say, I did not do this.
Because I didn't understand it
I
as
didn't
well.
understand that it's inappropriate to take something from someone under these circumstances. I didn't know. Hear me. Hear what I'm saying to you. Don't just prejudge me.
And I think that's a challenge we have to face all the time, especially, and like you said, how we have to put an effort to letting them hear where we're coming from. Another situation, you can tell me whether it's wrong, a culture shock as well, whereby you go for a party, because I'm just listening to what Stephen said there. And I found it with my children. They invite them for a party and everybody's expected to pay for something. How did tell me about that?
Encountering that, especially from primary school level, even secondary, because when as an African, as a Nigerian, when someone says there's a party, it's a thing of it's paid for by the host or food is provided. And I've even had to make adjustments, even like recently. I think the more British side came out in terms of everyone, please contribute this amount, this much. But for me, growing up, it felt so uncomfortable doing that. But a friend of mine said, no, this is how things
My
are
husband
done.
hates it.
Yeah, but it's a thing of how I've grown up. It's a thing of, okay, no, you pay, you even give people as they leave, all of that. There's this element of generosity and translating that into and culture. And I think there's an element of translating that culture into a new space with different rules and practices and all of that. But that was a shock for me, especially going somewhere and they said refreshments will be provided and it's sandwiches. And I'm expecting hot. I'm expecting hot food or expecting like a meal.
We're
But
still
then-
like that,
And we're still like
We're
that.
still
But then
like that.
also, it's the thing of me. I've noticed I bring some British elements into things I run now as well. In terms of okay. Are we here to eat or are we here to talk and network, right? Because sometimes it can fall into the mindset of like, because I'm expecting food, sometimes we can just go and sit and eat. But anyway, that's another conversation.
But the thing is that's where we celebrate our culture a bit more, because some of the things I run, I tell my fund, I said, food is important to us. You have to take what is important and make it work. And that's where you say, do I need to do that because I want to please a certain set of people, or do I do it because it's part of what we do?
Food is a great icebreaker as well in terms of overcoming cultural differences. It's a conversation starter. It's a thing of like, okay, what is jollof rice? Or I've gone for the most typical thing, or like, because it brings across stories like, oh, how we make it is like this. Everyone makes this differently. But even just bringing in, or like a food bring and share. I know at a workplace I was at that we had bring and shares, but it's a conversation starter. So where's this from? What's the story behind this? And you get to learn more about people through that. Yeah,
I think so.
And it's interesting because when we can be talking about our African culture right now, but even beyond the African culture into the Caribbean culture, because where there was a point in time where we were going to a Caribbean church. It was predominantly Caribbean, and when they had a function like that, and they said bring a dish like that, my wife would always make jollof rice, and I'd make fish in a certain way. And from the moment that we first made it and took it to that church till every time till we left and there was a function, they wanted that rice and fish. They always want. So there's a whole lot that goes on within the different cultures, even within the ethnic.
Yes, and it actually unifies. It brings you together, and and it's interesting, really, because you've already mentioned one. But the food is a big, and I think we can't let go of that. Sometimes they want that. Oh, there's no money for that, or what? And then you now do the sandwiches, which I do when I do food for my community, especially during COVID. A lot of the families, they were hungry, but they couldn't eat it.
I remember in primary school, Black History Months, in terms of being taught how to make different cultural dishes, right? Or parents coming in, or certain teachers saying, okay, this is a cultural dish, and actually having a lesson in how to make it. I don't know if they still do that, but that was a huge unifier in terms of the primary school I went to, because everyone was from all over the world. So not only will we have lessons in terms of how to cook certain things, but you have different cultural days where you wear your traditional, something linked to your home country, your ethnic origin, and having a parade and showing an element of pride for where you're from, and holding the flags and walking around, and that allows you to be proud of where you're from, and not
confidence as well.
And brings confidence as well. But also it's a thing of like, yes, this is where I'm from, this is the history, and it helps us take more interest in it, because sometimes when we hear the question, how do we overcome cultural barriers? That was we don't think of the unity thing.
We don't.
We think it's something like there's a barrier that must be broken down, but there's an element of also preserving certain things so that we can carry on that legacy, and be proud of where we've come from, be proud of the things that have contributed to where we are now.
Don't you think there's an unconscious element of, even when because you're made to feel that it's not as important, you let go of it, and then people that sense behind you say, oh, that's actually good, and they take over. I'll give an example. When we were born as well, the carrying of the baby on the back, it was made to see as a safeguarding issue. Oh, you're going to drop the baby, you're going to do this. But have you ever really thought about, because of that carrying on the back, it was actually so effective, and people got to realize that. But at that time, it wasn't valued at all. Now the baby things that they use, came from that. But nobody's going to think. Even the hair we do, the same thing. So it's interesting. Stephen, I'm going to come to you let's talk about names now. Looking at names.
In terms of names, I'm gonna go back first, because when I'm Stephen, Ayodele, Adewale. Very proud of
Come
the
on.
fact.
Yeah.
Very proud of the fact. When I have the opportunity to say that, and I again, it makes me proud to say that where I look back and think about my journey to Nigeria and my experiences there about being heard, which we covered in the last podcast, some of the experiences there, but I am so proud of the fact that I understand what my names mean.
Yes, our names have stories.
Exactly. In our culture, our names have stories. And when I say Stephen, I know what it means. I know its origin. When I say Ayodele, I know what it means, and I know its origin. And when I say Adewale, I know what it means. And for me, if you're not going to mention my name properly, don't mention it. Don't mess it up. No, it's not Ayo. If you I forgot this poet, that lady writer that said that she was given the example of her mother saying if they can call Tchaikovsky,
Okay.
they
Yes.
can call your name.
Yeah.
I'm a Chaka Ngozi or whatever. I can't remember anything. So
Oh, you mean Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie? No.
it's a female writer.
Yes, I think it's Chimamanda.
Chimamanda, yes. She said, and that resonated with me. Look, our names are potent with meaning. And our parents, consciously or unconsciously, gave us these names intentionally.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to send a clear message to whoever calls that name, whether it's for them or for you that bears the name. So, and I went on a bit of a destructive path when I came back to this country. I got a mindset I'm coming back to a country where, I'm just going to be me, I'm going to do me. And when I get back there, I'm going to do away with my culture. That's what I said. I'm going to get me some tattoos. I'm going to get some tattoos. I'm going to do my ears. I'm going to rebel. That rebellious thing was still in me. So when I came back to this country, everybody that I introduced myself to, I'd say my name is Steve. So if you ever hear anybody around me now that's calling me Steve, that's because they knew before I came to the realization that my parents did me a favor in calling me Stephen, and it's Stephen with a PH. I say it now.
Yeah, I've heard you say that.
You do not call me Steve. And even those that called me Steve, then I tell them, let me correct you on that, because my parents saw well in calling me Stephen. They didn't call me Steve. I'm going to hold on to that part of my culture, and honor my parents by what they called me.
I think I fall into that category as well about my name as well.
Okay.
Because like I said, I'm the first of 5 and I'm the only one that has an English name. So Margaret. But what I have done in respect for my parents as well, use my African name as much as I can. So when you see my books as well, you see Margaret Jumi. So even though Jumi is not really the full name, it's Olajumoke, but just for sake of, sometimes I don't want to get into arguments or too much talk, I just you call me Jumi. But at least it's still there and I can still explain to it. It's a fuller name. Yeah. Do you want to say
I
something?
love what pastors just said in the sense of correcting people.
Yes.
So my name is my full name Tioluwani Oluwa Pelumi Obasaju. Now Pelumi, there's a element in the sound of it. Like even some Yoruba people can say right? So even with British people, they'll say pe. Or even when I first came to this country and my name was called in the register, I didn't even know they were calling my name. I heard Pelumi and I was like, oh, it's me. Oh, okay, cool. So now even when I introduce myself, so with poetry, I make sure I put the ami ohon in terms of having the accents, and I've had to take time to learn that myself and teach myself and learn my language as well. And I'm still in that process of like, okay, preserving, and I think I spoke about in the last podcast in terms of what elements I want to keep, what elements I want to, but there's an element of preservation of like, okay, what does my name mean? And I want to say my name properly. But that, going back to that thing of correcting, right? When people do say my name incorrectly, I'll say, okay, my name is Pelumi, but I understand that you may not be able to say Kbe. So some people say Pelumi and some people say Kbe. But if you can do the Kbe, I'll be very appreciative of it. But also it's a conversation starter because I'll be like, okay, what does your name mean? My name means God is with me. It's the Yoruba version of Emmanuel or Emanuela. And again, our names hold stories, right? So it's a thing of it was the condition of my birth, like what my mum went through in terms of giving birth to me. So when I was born, I was actually born and was deemed as dead. And it was the nurse that was like, no, I will not give up on this child, and didn't give up on me. And even when all the doctors were saying, no, stop, she didn't stop in terms of giving me a light pat on my bum. And I let out a small cry. And it was also, I was born around Easter time as well. So having that story and having that conversation with my mom of like, why did you give me this name and what does it mean? And, we have this whole thing of naming ceremonies in our culture, and holding great respect and honor for those who have given us those names, because not only do their names have stories, but they're linked to people who are very important in our lives. And I think that's a way of honoring culture. That's a way of bridging cultural divides, especially for those of us who are part of the diaspora that are in this country. Like, okay, how do we carry these things on? Yes, there might be some English names in the mix, but what stories are our names telling? What is it telling about our place of origin, right? What is it telling about where have our parents have come from, where we have come from, the journey that we have taken? And I think it's so important that we preserve that we understand that
And that takes
it takes time. It takes time, but also I think it's also important to know that yes, there'll be bits of British culture that will come in, because that's also part of our story. That's part of our story, both influence it.
I think if you watch my one of my clips when I said I'm Nigerian, but I'm also a citizen of the world, it's about bringing that and celebrating each one in its own, in its own context. I'd like to even throw a bit more into this conversation in terms of language as well. Sometimes what we come up with and how people are, speak, we come from it. This is the way language is used. I'm one of my close friends, she said when she came back to this country, she didn't understand sometimes the extra politeness of the British in terms of asking you to do something. We are, from our cultural perspective, we just say, go and do that. Say this. We're a bit more direct. And I think that's an issue a lot of us have. We like being direct, isn't it? If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. Don't just smile with me, a plastic smile, and I don't even know that you're killing me, that kind of thing. So she was telling me this story about how she was at work, and then her boss was saying, oh, do you mind if this is it? Oh, do you mind? And she said, oh, I do mind, so she just didn't do it. And then she got a warning. But those are the kinds, because she didn't understand that her boss was actually telling her to do something, but was being polite. What are your experiences?
It's kind of like when this, can you do me a favor? No, why should I do you a favor? But in essence, they're telling you they want you to do it, and it's not just at work. It's in every aspect of where we interact with people. I mean, in church, I go to a predominantly Caucasian church, white people, and sometimes you see the struggle that they're going through to find the common grounds, the balance of, okay, these people are from a different culture. How do we merge our cultures together? Understand that they're not being, because there's a perceived notion that we're being hostile.
Exactly.
Or aggressive.
Or we're being aggressive. But this is just how we are.
I think we're very expressive people. We are from a very expressive culture. Even how we use language is very
we're dramatic,
it's dramatic.
Yes.
And sometimes, even me, sometimes people say I'm quite softly spoken, right? But then also I get elements of like, I can be blunt or direct. When I went to Nigeria last year, again, linked to poetry, it was really interesting being around other Nigerian poets because there was no element of me apologizing for how something came up, because it was like, it's fine. We just talk. We just get straight to the point. Whereas sometimes here, and going back to what I said at the beginning about code switching, some of that is like, okay, how will this be perceived? And it can mean that you are not bringing the fullness of yourself to different spaces. And we are from a very expressive and colorful culture, and we want to bring the fullness of ourselves to work, to school, to university,
and it can be perceived as something else.
Yeah,
isn't it?
it can be perceived as something else. And I think it takes an element of also like, we are like, hopefully this podcast will be listened to by different people, that we're not being aggressive, we're just an expressive people. Yes, there are times when voices can raise, or there are times, even I have friends from different cultures, and we have a thing in Nigeria and in African households that we talk over each other. In some cultures that can be perceived as very rude.
Yes.
But to us, it's just us interacting, right? Sometimes we can just interrupt. And I think I just interrupted you in terms of coming in. But you understood that we're just having a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how those little intricate details go and can be amplified the wrong way to a great extent. And, again.
And that's where the issue of microaggression comes in, because then you're at work and then somebody just says, oh, you're being aggressive. No, and then actually you're the one, because you're perceiving me in a way that is not really
And I
true.
think a way to overcome that is to have the best intentions,
Yeah.
right? To believe the best of people, right? Sometimes a lot of these things come from believing the worst, or coming into
It's the
situations
bias.
on a defensive note, rather than a thing of like, let me believe the best of this person.
Yes.
And if they've rubbed me up the wrong way or crossed a certain boundary, have a conversation.
Yeah.
What did you mean by this?
Yeah.
Like what did you mean by this? Or even that whole thing of, oh, can you do me a favor? Do you want me to actually get this? Like, even on our part,
Just
do you want me to-
clarify.
just to
Yes,
clarify,
yes.
do you want me to get this done, or is it it'll be nice to have, right? So it's also a thing of understanding different communication styles again.
I think it is, because we work with families and sometimes they get into so much trouble with social services, with schools, because of that lack of understanding as well. But you know what, guys? I think we've done justice today in terms of looking at, and I think we can overcome cultural differences. It just takes a bit more of empathy, active listening, food. We cannot but say our food is important. And we know that culturally it might be sandwiches here, fish and chips here, but actually let's celebrate each other and be more inclusive in how we do things. So we want to say cultural differences can be overcome. And I want to say thank you again to Dr. Pelumi and Mr. Stephen Adewale. See you on the next podcast.
See you.